Hello, everyone who has just logged on. We're going to go through some quick introductions, and we'll start with Katie from the Park City Film Series.
Yes, thank you. Hello, welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Katie Wang. I'm the Executive Director of Park City Film. We're Summit County's only art house cinema, now virtual. The virtual film that we saw, 2040, and the panel are being presented as part of our Real Community series. This is an ongoing program we've had for probably the last 15 years, and this is where we have the great pleasure of partnering with other nonprofits in our community to help elevate their missions and the community dialogue through film. So we're really pleased to be working with Swan Preserve and Eco Center and Park City Municipal Corp. We've been longtime partners with them, and it's great to always come back together around the critical issue of climate change. I've been tracking this film for a while, since before the shutdown, and just its message of hope and positivity and just kind of looking towards the solutions, I think is a message that we all needed to hear in January, and certainly a message that we need to hear right now as we look to create a low carbon future for not just our community, but for our entire planet. So I want to thank Hunter Cleansmith and Rhea Cohn for their tremendous work on putting this event together. Literally without them, we would not be here. So big thanks to them for figuring all this technology out for us. And our grant sponsors who make everything possible, the Park City Rotary Club and the Promontory Foundation, all of you that are participating that were able to make donations either for this event or otherwise to Park City Film and the Swan Preserve and Eco Center. We really appreciate your support now more than ever. And of course, our panelists. So thank you all for being here. A little side note, Park City Film is going to continue to offer films and panel discussions virtually throughout our closure until we're safely able to return to our theater, which looks like this fall. So if you're interested in seeing some more films and joining in discussions, please check out parkcityfilm.org, and you can sign up for an e-newsletter we send out once a week to get some updates. But now I will turn it over to Hunter, who's the Visitor Experience Coordinator at the Swan Preserve and Eco Center, and who will be our discussion moderator this evening. So take it away, Hunter. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Thank you. We wouldn't be able to do this without you either. We definitely figuring out how to show virtual films has been a challenge. So we're really excited to partner with you and with the Park City Municipal Corporation. So the Swan Preserve and Eco Center, we are not open right now, but we are looking to open, a little bit later in the summer. And we are an environmental nonprofit. We have over 1,200 acres of preserved land. It's all protected in perpetuity. And then along with that, we have a 10,000 square foot nature center that goes with it. So we do lots of education programming, events like this. And we do a large load of summer camps and field trips and guided walks out on the preserve. So it's a great opportunity to get outside, and we're really excited. We were excited to be able to show this film. I love having a little bit of a positive message to follow. So we're really excited about that. I'd like to thank RapTax for supporting programs like this. And I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. So we're really lucky to have Christine Mikell, who is the founder and principal at Enyo Renewable Energy. We also have Dr. Timothy LaSalle, who's the co-founder of the Center for Regenerative Agriculture and Resilient Systems at California State University. And then also Luke Cartin, who is our sustainability manager here, right here in Park City for the Municipal Corporation. So we're going to start out with some introductions from each of them. And then we'll move on from there. I'll ask a couple of questions to get us started. And then if any of you watching have questions, please feel free to throw them into the chat or the Q&A section. Rhea and I are watching both of those, and we will field those to our panelists. So let us know if you have any questions, and we'll go from there. So first of all, thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to ask, so could each panelist tell us a little bit about what brought you to your field, and then about what about the film resonated with you? We can start with Christine.
Sure, thank you, and welcome everyone. I'm actually not too far from you. Had I been able to drive and this were a live meeting, it would have taken me 25 minutes to see you all in Park City, but here I am in my house in Cottonwood Heights, Utah. I ended up sort of a long and circuitous path to where I am today, but I received my MBA from the University of Utah back in 2001. And as I was deciding what to do next, I had 3 job offers. One was to move back to Washington, D.C. and work for a beverage company called Honest Tea, which you may have seen. And Whole Foods or something like that. Another option I had was to do environmental education in Jacksonville, Wyoming, which would have been fabulous. I love Jackson. And the third was to work at the Utah Energy Office and start their renewable energy program for the state. Back then, in 2001, 2002, you may remember with the Olympics that the three mascots, I like to remind people back in 2002 were, if anybody knows, powder, copper, and coal. And so that's where I started my career. I thought, I want to make the most impact that I possibly can. And I thought by managing the program for the state of Utah on renewables and getting it going would do that. And I was just looking at some numbers earlier today. And when I started, we had 0 megawatts really of renewables in the ground in 2001. In 2016, I think it was, by 2016, we had over 1,700 megawatts of solar in the ground in Utah. And I just ran some numbers, and based on Salt Lake City, Park City, and the efforts that they've made, we'll see 2,000 more megawatts of solar in the ground by the end of 2023. So in my 20 or so years in the space, I've really watched things change in Utah. And I feel really blessed that I could have been part of watching this from the beginning. And looking back and thinking about those three choices, I could have worked at Honest Tea, and of course they sold part of the company to Pepsi. But I think I definitely made the right decision. And as we think about how the film resonated with me, I can't help but think a few weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, many of my friends and I were talking about the impacts of coronavirus, and I couldn't help but think that the Earth or the planet is just saying, hey, I'm getting really tired of waiting for you guys all to figure this problem out, and it's time that I'm going to force you to figure out. And I do think that the film, I like how it thinks about 2040, but I really do think that we're going to be in a revolution now where those things are going to start happening. The dominoes are going to start falling. You can see it with what I do every day. Coal plants are being shut down year after year, and my industry keeps growing. I'm really thankful to be part of it.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. I feel the same. I was wondering kind of the same thing when this all started. Like, the Earth is telling us that something is up. We need to pay attention. So I love that. Tim, do you want to go next?
Well, sure. Thank you, Christine. Nice to hear about your background and your not just commitment, but the big change that you've made in Utah. That's a tremendous example for so many of us around the world and in many states. You know, I came from a farm, and a conventional farm, and I ended up going to grad school, and I ended up being a professor for a dozen years, teaching high input intensive agriculture. It was all yield based, a lot of input systems, but it was degradatory. And as I traveled the world, and I've been to over 95 countries over the years, all I saw was degradation and destruction. And this occurred certainly within soils, within farming, within oceans, within streams, and agriculture played a major role in that. We've been destroying soils actually for 10,000 years. When we pulled the plow, invented a plow, and started to farm, we started to lose our topsoil, and there's only 60 years left of topsoil, according to the FAO, which reminds us we have to turn the tide. So I moved into the world of nonprofit and into working with the Center for Holistic Management to change the way we manage land and stop the spread of desertification. Eventually became CEO at Rodale Institute, the Organic Research Center, again in agriculture, but now one that started to look at how you build systems. And then I spent a number of years in Africa with the Howard Buffett Foundation, really with smallholder farmers and very tired and poor soils. But in 2008, I'd written a paper that we could capture all of the CO2 we were emitting in the soil. And that was based on data we had at Rodale. I learned later, not only could we increase that, but through work with David Johnson at New Mexico State, who we've now made an adjunct professor at Chico State, we can do 11 tons per hectare. And actually, these are the drawdown moments that give us a chance to turn the tide in this. So as we move away from fossil fuels, we know that that alone will not be enough. If we stopped emitting today, the planet will still heat up. And it's why I am well past retirement age. I get up every day and work on this issue of moving us towards the regenerative space of building our soils and capturing that carbon. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today and the commitment you all bring to this discussion.
Thank you, Tim. I think it's fascinating how that we have the ability to do that right now, and that we could be using those systems everywhere and still participating in a lot of the activities that we already like to do today. All right, Luke, you're up.
Hello, everybody. Good to see everyone. And Tim, nice to meet you. And Christine, it's always a pleasure to cross paths with you again. So I oversee Park City Municipal sustainability goals. So that is to get us to 100% renewable electricity and net zero carbon by 2030, which is North America's most ambitious climate goal. You'll hear little kids in the background running around, so it might be a little chaos. But you know, people think that, first of all, it's crazy for Park City, Utah to be chasing these goals, because it's, you know, our official state rock is coal. That's 100% true. It's 60-ish% coal generated power right now. But the great news is last year we passed House Bill 411, and with House Bill 411, we actually now have 23 communities, 40% of Rocky Mountain Power's load, that are dedicated to work together to go to 100% renewable by 2030. We've got, you know, the large policy pieces like that, but we also have a lot of things that are great to see in town. Everything from the electric buses. Last night we just approved buying 10 more of them, to the electric bikes, to our regenerative agriculture program out at McPullen on our kind of iconic entry corridor. So it's fun. My background is I grew up in upstate New York. Did better outside than indoors. I always liked being outside as a kid. So I actually went to a small state forestry school called the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and got a technical problem solving degree there. Had a job offer to work in New Jersey, and packed up my truck and drove around the West. Ended up in the ski industry. That's actually what landed me in Park City. And I love sustainability. I've been working in it for 20 years now. And it's just it's problem solving. That's exactly what it is. It's a lot of fun. So it's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm always happy to hear the kids in the background. That's one of my favorite parts of this new virtual world, is that everyone, you get to be a little bit more normal in your day-to-day interactions over the internet. Okay, so let's start out with the first question that I have is, I know that more often than not, climate change and solutions to climate change can be a tough topic to broach. And so how do you approach talking to clients or constituents or even friends about climate change and the impacts that your programs can have on addressing it, or in addressing it? We can just keep going, maybe in the same order.
Okay, I'm happy to go first. I think for me, so I didn't mention, I'm also a city council member in Cottonwood Heights, and Cottonwood Heights is one of those anomaly cities. We sit between Big and Little Cottonwood Canyon here in Utah, and so we some of us feel like we want to be like Park City, and I think some of us feel like we're, I don't know, in rural Utah. So it's a really interesting mix. But as a council, the 5 of us came to agree 100% to support the same resolutions, really to follow Park City and Luke's team. So we too, we're the 5th city in Utah to pass that resolution to be 100% by 2030. So I guess so speaking climate change, I would say as a city, as an elected official in my town, we don't often use climate change. Fortunately, with the costs of renewables coming down so much, we've been able to make it more of an economic argument. And so we tend to think of it in 3 pillars, that if it's economic, if it's if we're environmentally sensitive, and we can say, and, you know, it helps, and we can do it. And so we really pushed our initiative because it was the right thing to do. It was cost effective. It was good for the environment. It was the right thing to do. And then in my business as a renewable energy developer, where I develop wind projects and solar projects and try to entice companies to buy the output of my projects, really what it's come down to is just cost. When you look at the cost of coal or natural gas, you're probably in the 6 cents per kilowatt hour, and solar and wind, depending on where you are in the 2, 3, 4 cents per kilowatt hour. So for me, I'm able to speak purely in an economic sense. And when you look at Facebook or Google and all those companies that Procter and Gamble that have these commitments to be 100% renewable, I would say the reason why a lot of those companies are able to do is because it's ending up not increasing their bottom line. They're actually able to see savings by making that shift. So that's how I speak about it. And in my life, it really comes down to economics, which is a really great argument to make. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. It's just the cost-effective thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It seems like if you can find something that really affects everyone on a level playing field, then it makes it so much easier for it to be a everyone agrees topic. Great, thanks, Christine. Just so before we move on to Tim, before everyone who's watching, if you have any questions for any of the panelists or for the whole panel together, throw them into the chat or the Q&A and we can field them from there. So you're welcome to do those at any time and we'll go from there. All right, Tim, go ahead.
Well, what I want to mention is that one of the things in working with students and young people at times, one of the things I realize is the millennial generation has grown up in a technological consciousness. And one of the dangers in that sort of awareness is that there's a sense that technology is going to save us or we can fix it with technology. And we need to remind ourselves that technology got us into this fix and this problem. And it is not in and of itself going to fix anything. As a matter of fact, it'll probably exacerbate it to most degrees. And we're not going to have factories that are going to suck carbon dioxide out of the air and fix this problem. But we do need to draw down. And as we said earlier, we can't just reduce the emissions or limit them. We actually have to pull them back down, which nature knows how to do. And this is where we have to take our science and our experience and our practice and begin to help robustly enhance nature's capacity to do that. And this is not biotechnology. It literally is to understand the miraculous nature of biology. And the root exudates that the film does talk about, which I'm happy that in the regenerative agricultural piece, they actually began to explain a little bit. But what they didn't really explain was if you take, for example, a fungal dominant soil, you can end up with this huge level, as we talked about, maybe up to 11 tons of carbon dioxide captured by each hectare in a very robust agricultural system where you have fungal dominant soils. And not only do you have really incalcitrant carbon in those fungi, but in fact, you start to make healthier plants that become, which I didn't know was possible in the last few years, you increase the photosynthesis efficiency of the plant. So it captures more, it produces more food, it produces more biomass, and it grows more biology, which are all carbon-based organisms below the soil line. So that's a marvelous feature when we get out of our old paradigm of high input agriculture or agriculture that disturbs soil, going to a no-till and a biologically focused regenerative, which we could get into the specifics, but without going there right now, we can make something that is actually more productive in biomass per square meter than a tropical rainforest. And you never think that farming could do that, but it actually has that potential. I think also a colleague of mine, Brian Van Herzoon, who was in the film with the seaweed discussion, also talks about the huge level of carbon that can be captured when we start to farm the ocean and again, photosynthesis capacity. So here's two natural systems that will help us pull it down. And I got into an email discussion with Paul Hawken because he had kind of said we need all these pieces and we're only taking peer-reviewed work that's more of the averages in the middle, not these more extreme levels that both Brian's talking about or that I'm talking about. And I would posit that challenge it, it's fine, but have the scientific curiosity to inquire and experiment and try. And I just know that as we're doing it, the replications are proving it's working. So it's pretty exciting. We can build systems back after we've been degrading them for thousands and thousands of years. We can turn the corner on this.
I think that's amazing. That was one of my favorite parts of the film was about the the farming the ocean. That wasn't something that I had really ever thought about. And the fact that it can grow that quickly and have that big of an impact is amazing to me. And not only help us by taking carbon out of the air, but also create more habitat that we've destroyed in the ocean. So it's just like so cool that it has such a great impact, and that could be such a big thing. All right, Luke.
Yeah, so I think a few quick points. So those are all great. I think one of the things is towns have to be problem solvers. You know, to use this current crisis as a great example, right? It's states and communities are the ones who have to lead and figure out how to make this all work and understand what's going on to solve this. The other thing too is I think the sustainability movement has to change too a little bit. It's time to stop talking about tons of carbon and put it in economic value. You know, if you took Park City's carbon footprint and you monetized it, right? So our carbon footprint is just based off our electricity, our diesel, gasoline, moving goods and services, all these other parts. It's a $245 million a year spend. So that's getting people, goods and services in and out of town and around town too. So it includes airlines and all this other stuff, but let that sink in. It's $250 million almost that is spent on fossil fuels. So when people say, how are we going to pay for this? All of a sudden that's kind of a no-brainer, right? It's just, we are already spending $250 million. So if we can capture 20% of that back in our community, that's equivalent of opening another Park City or opening another ski resort. So that's a huge, huge win. And then the other key piece for us is, you know, we want to be net zero carbon by 2030. To get rid of all the gasoline cars and the natural gas boilers and stuff, it's going to be hard. So we have to rely on a sequestration piece. And the great thing is we're blessed with the eastern side of our county and the region all around us. It's family ranching, and you know, the family ranchers are not, you know, they're not making millions of dollars doing this. They're operating on a razor thin margin, but they also know their lands better. So if there was a way to incentivize them to take on some of these concepts that were in the film or work collaboratively on this and not vilify what they do, but rather engage them, it could have a massive economic impact and also sustainability impact here too, and also make it feel authentic. You can go see, touch, and feel all these great things that happen, because when the soil is healthy, the plant life above it is just abundant. It just looks completely different. So, you know, people say, hey, that's great that Park City's doing this, but it's not even a drop in the bucket. But my response is we're already having big waves. And, you know, that's the fun thing about sustainability is it's a big, hard project to figure out. And there's a lot of really interesting things to work on. And there might be things that we can figure out today, things that we haven't figured out, but we think we can, and other things we have to kind of push off just a little bit. But the great thing with having a 2030 goal is pushing off is 2 years, not pushing off 30 years. So that's kind of the strategies we're doing here. And that's how you break it into manageable chunks in my mind.
That's a great point. I love that idea of just pushing things off for 2 years instead of being like, oh, we'll work on that, you know, 10 years down the road or something like that. I also love that you talked about how you can see such a difference when your soil is healthy versus not so healthy. So the preserve obviously was ranched for a really long time, and it's all native wetland. But it looked like a big dry dust bowl. And so it's really interesting to see how even just in the last, 30 years that the preserve, since it's been some restoration work has taken place, all of the biodiversity that we have and the plants and animals that use it it's so impressive to see how quickly it's regenerated itself. So that gives me hope for things like that to work really well. Awesome. Christine, we actually have a question for you. So Beth asked, sorry, for some reason I can't see the whole question. Okay, there we go. Do the economic costs associated with the solar and wind you mentioned stand on their own, for example, without government subsidies versus traditional power costs?
I'd be happy to send Beth an analysis that we've done, but because all energy sources have subsidies with them, if the interesting thing about wind and solar is that our subsidies is on the top line. It's very easy to see what it is. So for wind, it's about, 2 cents. So even if you were to take the wind subsidy of say 2 cents and you add it to what wind is, 2 to 4 cents, it's still going to be less than coal or natural gas. And that's ignoring the fact that they have their own incentives. Natural gas have what's called they have a financing structure that allows them to get cheaper cost of capital than renewables do. And so it's really interesting when you start stacking up all of the incentives for each of the resources. I think I'm happy to share what we've put together with her, showing that even with when you add incentives to everything, renewables is still less. Sorry, poor grammar.
That's amazing. We also have, while we're still with you, Christine, Beverly Harrison, and the rest, Tim and Luke, you're welcome to jump in on this one as well. So Beverly Harrison said, I love the microgrid solar generation that we got to look at happening in Bangladesh. That is so exciting to think that communities could start to go in this direction. How realistic do you think this model is for the US, and who would start it, and how would that happen?
Luke, I don't know if you've been thinking about this more than I have.
Yeah, I can definitely tackle that side of it. So microgrids are, people used to view them as, oh, that's Lucy, my daughter, coming over to say hi. Microgrids have, people used to think as just kind of cool demonstration projects, but there are cities in California that, you think of all the power outages they had last year, like they're literally, the power was out for weeks because of high fire danger. So microgrids are actually, they're the ones that kept fire stations online, police stations online. Microgrids are definitely something we're looking into for the resiliency side. Park City is actually identified as a area it's kind of wildfire concern. So Rocky Mountain Power could actually shut our power off without much notice. And when you think about that, that's kind of dire when you just look at what's going on in California, where people's homes are not having electricity to them for 2 to 5 weeks. So microgrids are definitely an area that's very interesting. And I think as battery technology really starts to come into its own, I think that's key. I also truly believe that the efficiency side is actually what's really truly going to drive this. But yeah, microgrids is definitely something on our radar, and we're looking at applications all over. And we're actually working with everyone from the utilities to the National Renewable Energy Lab to understand the impacts and how we could successfully launch one here in Utah.
I am definitely not an expert in microgrids, but I have a couple of comments. One is that, in fact, that in briefing Al Gore once with regard to carbon capture, I was sat through and listened to people that are briefing him on the macro grids and how much energy is lost in that. So Luke and Christine, probably in the microgrids, you have a lot of savings with micro instead of macro systems. So they make a lot of sense. But I think it's also an image that we should be thinking about with regard to our food systems. And that is, how do we create more local? So that's more local energy, which has more security and more perhaps resiliency and perhaps ways to adapt more quickly to the needs. If we watch what's happening right now with COVID virus and food shortages, both in your grocery store shelf, but also with respect to even getting food banks filled, a lot of that is based on how our system has become conglomerated, and there's mega corporations involved in our food system too deeply. If you go to a city like Chicago, its sources less than they're in single digits as far as what percentage of their food comes from the 4 states around them. Now that seems absurd, doesn't it? Because so much corn and soybean is grown, the vegetables and the orchards and a lot of the local produce are no longer grown in those regions, and they should be restored because it's good soil and it creates more resiliency. As the film pointed out, and it's really crucial, that most of the food in the world is produced by smallholder farmers. It's not these mega big farms. And we need to be returning to that for its resilient nature. Christine had mentioned the point here about the economics and why she takes that conversation about moving towards renewables. That's exactly the conversation we have with farmers about regenerative agriculture. It's not about, well, there's a lot less chemicals. Well, there's, we're going to capture carbon out of the atmosphere. Sadly, a number of farmers still believe there is no climate change. So that's not the topic to engage them with. But the topic to engage them with is the economics of how they can save money on their input costs dramatically saved while building soil for the future for their kids. And so those are the kinds of ideas we need to pay attention to, because language matters on communicating and converting people to build and reinvest in the resiliency of our planet, even if we never use the word planet, even if we never use the word climate change. And so I appreciate what Christine said and what Luke's just outlined here as well.
I think that's a great point, that often just being able to meet on a common ground that's not necessarily about climate change is such a great way to start talking to people, because it has to make sense for them in their daily life. And so many people are busy and have lots going on, and sometimes that's not a top priority. But if you can say, hey, this will make your life a little bit easier, it'll save you some money, then it makes it so much easier for people to agree, even if it doesn't, the climate change aspect doesn't impact them. So I love that point. Awesome. So I have one more question for all of you. So the film envisions a 2040 where we've made significant climate improvements, right? And it gives us samples of that. And I loved all the little graphics and where they have the people sitting on the small shovel or those kind of things in each part. It made it a little more fun. But my question is, one of the main topics is, what's your 2040? So for each of you, what do you envision a successful 2040 being? And we can go in the same order if you want. So Christine, if you want to start.
Thank you. I think this is a question that I struggle a little bit answering because I really thought the film did a pretty good job of taking what I think would be amazing. I love the part when the director was in New York City and you could see all the cars moving around and the overpasses, and if you could take those cars away and you can create green spaces, and you can have all these community gardens on the top of the buildings, and much like Tim just described, where you have these ecosystems that are all local. I mean, I think that I loved that vision. So I would say my vision is similar to their vision. What I would add to that about the film is that I really liked how he included all the interviews with the little kids, and where I was thinking, what inspired me, and I think about my husband. He builds roads here in Utah, but he's an environmentalist and he's passionate, and I just think if there was a path to go from where we are today to that result, and the passion that everybody would have, from college age kids getting out of school to the likes of my husband, just having that goal in mind and knowing that we could get there, I just think that it'd be revolutionary for so many of us that are in jobs that there's just rote, and we go there and we do it, and there's no passion, there's no excitement. And I really see having that end goal, and I could just see the world and all of us just lifting up with excitement about just going to work every day. So that's doesn't really answer your question, but I think for me, when I was watching the film, I felt hopeful for so many people to get excited just about everyday goals and what they do.
I actually think that's a great answer. That's probably right along where I would have been, because a lot of the things are exactly what I would love to see in 2040. And I think that I agree with you, that part where the overpasses were all of a sudden becoming green pathways and people were biking more and maybe just living a little bit more slowly, but having so much more enjoyment, as opposed to, like he said, when you're sitting in traffic and you're generally a pretty happy person and you have a good life, and somehow you still have that rage inside of you because you've been sitting in traffic for 45 minutes. That I totally felt that. I was like, yeah, when I ride my bike to work or I ride the bus to work, my day just is so much more calm than the days that I have to drive and I have to deal with other drivers. And so I agree. I think that having that excitement and being able to be a little more calm is great. All right, Tim, do you want to go next?
Sure. Well, at the risk of, offending again, this idea about technology, let me just say that, and I'm not a total Luddite, although maybe sometimes I could be described as that, but it strikes me that until we actually re-arrive or initiate ourselves into a deep relationship with Earth, with the planet, with whole systems, with nature, and that we create that relationship more on a daily basis. So it becomes part of our conscious behavioral relating back to Earth. We can start to go more green, more renewable, less impact, but still end up in the same problem of ending civilization because of some polluting, destructive overuse of resource. And if you just look at the energy grid and the amount of energy and power used by our internet systems, by the technology we're engaged in right in this moment, that should challenge our sense of relationship to the planet and let us think in terms of less time on this, more time out there, less time in consumption, of course, more time in regenerating and how we're planting things and how we're growing things and getting the carbon out of the atmosphere and feeding the biodiversity of the planet and cooling her down as rapidly as we can. And so the proactivity that Katie had said at the beginning of the conversation we're having, to me, is important for each and every one of us, not just policymakers, not just farmers, or just urbanites and certain things, but every one of us, and not just Americans, and we've been one of the biggest violators, but every person on the planet. Our impact on the Africans I worked with in climate change, I saw every day. Our impact, they said Africa would be the first continent affected, and it was, and people starved to death because of our emissions. Having a sense of that overall global humanity, planetary interconnection is really crucial for us as humans to be able to ensure a future for all of living beings on Earth. And so that's where 2040, yeah, I love all of the soft touches and the green, but where's our consciousness that takes us back to who we really are and connected with this planet? So thank you.
I think that's a great point. That's a challenge that I think about a lot, is that we don't really know where our food comes from a lot of the time. A lot of people don't think about how every little thing on the earth is interconnected with every other little thing. And I see that is a big challenge, because how do you get people engaged and to care if you don't even have a good understanding of what the natural world is? And so I think that's a great point. And I love that, Christine, you talked about having more local systems, and you did as well, Tim. And so I think that could make a big difference too, even if you just, you go to pick up your when I pick up my vegetables from the farmer's market versus from the grocery store, I know where they came from. I talked to the person who grew them. I have this like deeper connection with it, and that makes me care about protecting that a lot more than just, running into the market and grabbing a pepper that was grown I don't know where, and I don't know how long it's been there or where it came from. So I think that's a great point. All right, Luke.
Yeah, I think just to follow up on what Tim said too, of that tie back to Earth and in the people leading this. I mean, that's where the city's sustainability goals came from. Is, we're a community of avid outdoors people, and we love to everything from enjoy the snow to enjoy the trails and be outside. And when people made that tie that this is under threat and it's already impacting us, we need to step up. We need to do something. Park City's lost 6 weeks of sub-freezing temperatures since the 1970s. So think about that. We're already, our winter's 6 weeks shorter in 40, 50 years. So that's really impactful. But the good thing too is you look at the community visioning we just went through, right? And so it was called Vision 2020, and the main areas that the community said loud and clear that we need to focus on is how we get around, transit and transportation. I mean, we over 15% of our land is pavement, so we need housing. We also, let's start relooking at how we get around. It's just foolish to use the traditional ways. Carbon, we got the very clear to keep focusing on that. And the interesting thing is about 30 to 35% of our carbon footprint is transportation related. We're going to focus on zero waste and food waste, which makes sense as well. We also got the clear piece too of looking at our economy. Like, how can we diversify? How can we make it fuel robust so it's not just all tied to snow, tied to Mother Nature? So it's the thing is my 2040 is I get to be a doer, right? I get to go out and try to figure out and problem solve how to do all these things. And it's fun. I mean, I get told all the time it'll never happen. Like when we tried to pass a 100% renewable bill in Utah with the utility, writing a bill that never been written before in the second most conservative legislature in the country, and we passed it with 2/3 majority. So, I mean, we get told all the time that's foolish, it's not going to work. But if you don't come with other solutions, the best way to figure it all out is truthfully by trying, and you want to fail fast. So it's been it's an exciting time, but also, you know, the great thing is the community is what's really pushing our government to go do things. And I think that's the thing that people need to stay strong on, you know, hold the elected folks and hold the government accountable. And but also, you know, don't just point the finger at someone else. Don't vilify other folks, and figure out these solutions together, because that's how we're going to become a better community, not just a better city.
I love that. I think that's a great way to think about it, is to not vilify other people, you know, make it like, here's how we can improve things, and here's what I can do to make it better. I have a bad habit of getting frustrated during the holiday season here, where I see people who are visiting and they have bought like 6 cases of bottled water at the grocery store, and for some reason that just really gets to me. And lately my partner and I have come to a solution where I will take reusable water bottles with me to the store, because we have so many at our house, and I will give them to people instead of getting angry. But I think that's a great point, because it's, you know, a lot of people too, it's not a priority, and maybe they don't know that it is as big of a problem as it is. So I think having that more of a community consensus and connecting with people on the same level is such a great point. So Katie has a question. She said, Luke, can you talk about Mountain Town 2030 and how these solutions might be actualized in mountain towns as a collective?
Yeah, definitely. So back in October 2nd through the 4th, we hosted over 30 mountain towns to Park City, from kind of all over the West, both county level, city level, from the Bozeman's, Missoulas, Ketchums, down to the Aspens and Vales and Eagle counties. And that's where we had, that's what brought Jane Goodall to town, and Paul Hawken. And out of that, the response was just saying, hey, mountain towns are unique places filled with people who love to take on challenges. So we actually think mountain towns can lead kind of the doing part of this, right? We're not as big of as a New York City, and that's to our advantage. We can go solve this stuff. We're used to operating, you know, Park City's a year-round residents of 8,000. Sundance is in town. It feels like there's 100,000 people in town. We're used to kind of these scalability and solving issues. So we kind of posed it out there of saying, hey, if we started aligning on climate goals, and working together on it, we actually think we can speed up the knowledge sharing and speed up the solutions. So a couple of positive things that have come out of that is we've gotten, even during these kind of really unprecedented and weird times, and truthfully, really, it's a financial strain on governments as well, we still have high engagement from all communities. And the interesting thing is we've actually had both Crested Butte, Colorado, and Jackson, Wyoming align on a carbon neutral by 2030 goal as well. So now all of a sudden we're actually seeing more communities come to this and saying we can figure this out together. The city of Missoula County, and Bozeman took the 100% renewable bill that we did in Utah, and they're working with their investor-owned utility in Montana to figure this out. The really promising thing too is it wasn't just city governments. We had the 4 major ski areas that are now aligning their goals. So Vail Resorts is net zero carbon by 2030. Boyne Resorts, their largest property, Big Sky, is going carbon neutral by 2030 as well. We've got, there's just a lot of kind of great momentum, because mountain towns are just stepping up saying, hey, you know what, enough's enough. Let's figure this out together. So it's a really exciting time. There's a lot more to come. We're still just kind of figuring out what's next and how to keep people engaged. But there's a lot of really interesting focus on this. And to tie it back to the regenerative agriculture side too, we're the other major component, there were land trusts there. And when you think of a lot of these mountain communities, they've bought open space around them that's old agriculture, or they have ranching that surrounds them, or smaller family farms. And this is cool because it's again, it's a way to politically engage folks that have been potentially sitting on the other side of the table, or not even a part of this conversation, and all of a sudden we can say, hey, we have a potential solution that could benefit all of us. So it's the mountain towns piece has really started a great conversation amongst mountain towns. And again, Jackson actually passed their 2030 resolution the same night they passed their emergency order for COVID-19. So that's how important it is to them. Moab and Grand County jointly published an article on Earth Day as well. They were attendees. So it's a really cool concept. And it wasn't saying, come to Park City and see all the great things we're doing. It's, hey, we can all kind of talk the same talk, and we all kind of face the same issues, but we also have kind of that same drive and will. So it's been, it's really, really impactful. And as people want to learn more or become more involved or just educate themselves more, they should just reach out. I'll happily get them engaged, and it's pretty cool because it's grassroots based.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that we have this unique opportunity at being like a resort town and having such a diversity of groups that are big stakeholders here. So I think that's such an awesome program to see happening. So Mary Klosser actually asked, this question is for Tim, and she wants to know, how long does it take to transition a farm from traditional to regenerative, like shown in the movie, and how long before an economic advantage will appear?
Well, one of the things in the organic world, they always say it takes 3 years to transition to sort of build your soil back from sort of a dead soil to one that has some fertility in it. And we could kind of live with that. But what we've found is if you go to Chico State's website on the Center for Regenerative Ag, you can go down to David Johnson's piece. When you inoculate soil with this fungal dominant inoculant that you can make in your own backyard with your own inputs at almost no cost, because there's a whole complexity of organisms in that, and that makes a very robust system. That can happen immediately, and you can see results very, very fast. We're doing an experiment with Howard Buffett in Arizona on the cornfield, and in the very first year, the treatments that had the inoculant made that test plot, which was 70 some acres, more money than the treatments that had full fertilizer. And one of our treatment had 0 fertilizer, the other had 15% with the inoculant. And so that they were profitable, and the fertilizer one wasn't. So that shows you that you can get the same kind of yields in the first year. Johnson's work has shown increased yields by sometimes 20, 30, even 40%, 50% higher, depending on the crop, after 3 to 4 years of building the soil. So a typical organic transition is at least 3 years. Inoculating can kickstart that, and I think you can see results pretty rapidly. So I encourage you to look at that and think about how you get the living system kick-started, and then you won't have to wait so long to see results.
That's amazing. Within a year, I had no idea. That's so cool to hear that. She also asked if you have any examples of success stories, but I think you covered that with, did you say David was his name?
Yeah, David Johnson. And I mean, he's the scientist, farmer. That's the neat thing about the scientist. Cindy Daly, she's a scientist and farmer, and I'm the same. But there are examples like Gabe Brown, who's written a book, From Dirt to Soil, and that's a great book to read. And it took him longer in that transition, but he was on a learning curve. But they have an organization that teaches farmers. And there are ways to begin to understand this where you can, in your own farm, ranch, or backyard, start to make the transition very rapidly.
Wow, that's amazing. And then we also had a question from, let's see here, get rid of my chat and pull up the Q&A, and then I can get that one for you. So Megan Ellis said, I just want to say thank you for sharing the language and talking points for finding common ground. That helps to keep this moving forward. And then she said, do you think that making changes like these have to come more from government or from people's mindset? And any of you are welcome.
I would make a comment, it's all hands on deck, which means we have to engage, and maybe we can help lead our government and our policymakers. And I'm in conversation with mayors and in and out. Sometimes I used to be in and out of DC quite a bit. They typically are going to follow where we as society are going to lead them. And that's why we have to engage this. We need it at all levels, all hands on deck, but that means us first.
I think that's a great point. Does anyone else want to comment on that one?
I think Tim summed it up very well. That was that was great.
Okay, awesome. So just in closing, we have about 10 minutes left. So I just have a couple of closing questions for you all. And then if we get any other questions that come in between that, I'll ask those, of course. So if those of you watching have questions, feel free to continue to type them in. So one of the questions that I have covered is in relation to the work that you do, what like day-to-day suggestions do you have for helping to mitigate climate change or things that people can start doing right now? I know, Tim, you just talked about you could start in your backyard right now. So that's a great place to start, but any other suggestions? Whoever wants to go is welcome to speak up if you have something.
I'll go. I think the biggest thing is don't be scared to try. I think a lot of people just want that like ultimate easy fix and solution. Just go try. I mean, it's amazing. I'll never forget when Jack Thomas, our ex-mayor, when his office was out in Kimball Junction and he was the mayor, so he'd come into City Hall all the time, and he got an electric bike, and he literally electric biked like thousands of miles. You always see Miles Redeman, another kind of Park City local out on it. You see the amount of people just changing around how they get around is already starting to bounce through town. I think that people just get so scared of, well, what if I plant a tree and it dies? Okay, then just learn how to plant a tree better. Like just don't be scared to go do stuff, try stuff. You're gonna find the most effective things, and also be bold. You can. It's amazing how much you can learn by jumping in. I mean, I'll use a very easy example, a small example. I'd never touched a chicken before I got chickens. And once I get chickens, it's just part of life. It's part of food. We use it to actually barter with our neighbors, honey and all. I have honey as well. So it's been a really great thing, but you can read all about it on the internet, but until you go do it, you don't get that kind of full experience. Even if you just want to learn more about your food, or say, hey, I'm any meat I'm going to buy, I want to buy it from Utah. There's actually more resources out there than you'd think. That's where we get all of ours. You could set yourself a goal and be ambitious about it, because you'll be really surprised on how successful you can be. So that'd be my thought. Be bold and go try.
I think that's a great suggestion, because it seems like so many things seem really daunting until you do them, and then it's like, oh, that wasn't that big of a deal. Like I could have been doing that the whole time. For me, it was like when I moved here, I came from a rural town in Pennsylvania. I had never really ridden like a public bus transit system, and I moved here without a car. And I was like pretty scared about how I was going to figure out getting around and what to do. And once I realized how simple the bus system was here and how effective it was, that I could get everywhere and not really need a car, that was amazing. And granted, I have a car now, but I most days I ride the bus to work, or I ride my bike. My bike one way back, but it makes my day so much better. And it was actually a really easy transition to make. And so I think that's a great point, is that you don't know until you try things out. So, all right.
Well, Hunter, I'd say with examples here with both Luke and Christine and you as you're talking, you remind me that a colleague years ago, Barry Posner, who's written books on leadership, and he posed a question once. He said, are leaders born or are they made? That's an age-old question, but he answered it. He said, all leaders are born. And I know that's kind of a pun, it's kind of a joke, but it's also kind of a reminder that we are all born, and being a leader simply is risking getting out there and trying and engaging. Be that if it takes roles like both Luke and Christine are doing in city council, or in working with all of these other towns, which is just amazing. That may not be your forte, but to engage if it's just on your block, or if it's actually just in your school system, it doesn't matter, or if it's in the food supply system, some way engage, because it really is time. I mean, we have less than a decade to really make a change in climate change. And that does mean it will take us all. And so I not challenge, I actually remind us we can lead. And it doesn't matter what the size is, but let's get busy about it.
I think that's a great way to put it. I love that. Leaders are born, you just have to do something. Cool. Chris,
I may just tell a story. In Cottonwood Heights, I've been in office for almost 2.5 years, and it sounds like Luke's community is much more engaged than our community. But the areas that I've seen engagement, and maybe the most inspiring form of engagement I saw were a group of students, middle school students, who were tired of picking up their styrofoam trays and taking their apple wrapped in plastic from where they collect food back to their tables. And they were just tired of it. And they met with us, the city council, they met with the school board, and they met with the school, their own school, and they were able to implement a styrofoam ban district-wide here in Salt Lake City. And these are, 10-year-old kids. Actually, it was, I take that back. Elementary students, 5th graders, that this fall committed to making a change and doing that. And I think what it really taught me is to Tim, your point, and Luke, your points. Be bold and take the risk, and you will be surprised at what you can do. So it was, I think, a group of 5 students, and they got petitions, and it's just amazing to see that's a significant change. I would say a whole district no longer using styrofoam and having to come up with solutions. And what do we do with all the plastic forks? Do we go to metal? Oh no, all the kids are throwing the metal and the trash. What do? We go back to the plastic? I mean, so it's just this problem solving that Luke's been talking about in his degree. I mean, I think we're all problem solvers, and this is a great opportunity for us to be problem solvers. But so many people are nervous about getting engaged, at least in our community, and even just coming into the council and standing at the microphone and saying, hey, I have an idea. Those ideas matter. I see it all the time, and it doesn't take much to convince people what the right thing to do and move forward. And so I share that student story with you because I really thought it was unique, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Right.
I think that's a great example too, because if a bunch of kids in 5th grade can make that happen, then adults can certainly make things happen as well. We have the potential. We were those kids in 5th grade once, and hopefully those kids, when they grow up, they know that they can make that change now. So how cool of them to do that. I love that. So we are coming right to the end of our panel. So do any of you have any closing comments that you want to bring up before we end? Go ahead and say them now if you do.
I'll just go quick. I mean, because I work for everyone here. I think that's the goal, right? Stay engaged and reach out if you're passionate or you have ideas. Easiest way to track me down right now is email. Don't swing by City Hall because no one's home, but just shoot me an email. I'm easy to find on the city website, but yeah, stay engaged, please.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke.
I just say in closing, thank you for coordinating this. Thank you for actually moving it out of a non-doing environment, just watching a film, into an engagement, and now into actually having some people here that are doing things, reminding us all of us are and can do much more. And thank you, Hunter, and for your team for pulling this off. Appreciate being a part of it.
Well, thank you for joining us. I was so excited when you were able to jump on board. That's been one of my favorite parts about this virtual discussion time, is that we can bring in people from much farther away than we ever would have been able to. So thank you for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes, and I feel honored to be on a panel with Tim and Luke and you, Hunter. It's been really great to hear, and I wish we had more time, because I really would love to hear more from you, Tim, about all the great work you've done, and be inspired, and try to bring some of what you're doing to some some areas of our community where I see these opportunities of regeneration and trying to do that instead of another subdivision. But
Yep.
I'm hopeful these are good times to make those changes.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We super appreciate it. If you have any resources that you want to share or anything that are important to you, I'm going to send a follow-up link to everyone who's watching and everyone who registered for the film as well. We recorded this lecture, so that will go out as well, and you're welcome to watch it. And then the last thing is, thank you so much for being with us. I hope to stay in touch with all of you. I loved hearing from each of you. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm just excited to have the opportunity to chat with you. So thank you for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Look for a follow-up email with me. For those of you watching, there's a survey as well. Please fill it out so that we can have even better events in the future. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I think, Ria, you'll have to end the event.